call this meeting of the Town of Sheffield Select Board to order on November 7th, 2022. I want to thank CTSB for recording this meeting and for people being here tonight with us in person and those of you who will be watching this later or live. Our first order of business is a tax classification hearing, which I would like to open at this point and invite Tammy Blackwell, our town assessor, to the podium.
Good evening. The classification hearing tonight is for the selectmen to adopt a single tax rate or adopt a minimum residential factor establishing two tax rates, one for the residential and open space and a second higher rate for the commercial, industrial, and personal property. Another purpose of the hearing is to consider discounts or exemptions for open space, the residential exemption, or the small commercial exemption, which would establish split rates that would result in a higher tax rate for non-qualifying property owners. The total taxable valuation of the town is $878,490,340, and the total tax levy, this is the amount of money that's to be raised through appropriations, is $10,120,208.72. The tax rate for a single tax rate would calculate to be $11.52. This is a decrease of 92 cents from last year, as valuations did go up a little bit this year due to the market, the sales. The excess levy capacity is $2,186,270.28. And the Board of Assessors recommends a single tax rate. Historically, the Select Board has adopted a single tax rate, affirming the proportionate share of the tax levy between all classes of the property.
Are there any questions for Tammy from the board?
No.
Are there any questions for Tammy from anyone in the audience? All right, Rhonda, is this a hearing that we close and then make our decision, or should we make our decision before we close it?
Does it matter to you?
I don't know.
I would close it and then make your decision.
All right, so if there are no questions for Tammy, Rhonda or Jill, do you have any questions for Tammy?
I do not.
All right, then I would take a motion to close the tax classification hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tammy. Board, what would you like to do regarding this?
I'll make a motion that we go along with the recommendation of the Board of Assessors with a single tax rate of $11.52 per thousand.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Tammy. All right, our next item is a public hearing, and this is on the general bylaw fees. If we can go ahead and open this public hearing. This was also as a handout outside for anyone who's attending. If you haven't had a chance to peruse this, basically in April, when town voters approved adoption of the recodification of the general bylaws, our attorney had requested and suggested that all of the fines, or the majority of them, be taken out, and that they be set by the Select Board where appropriate and other departments where appropriate. This would allow any changes of fees not to have to go back through another town meeting and approvals, etc. So what you have in front of you is all the chapters and all the sections of the general bylaw recodification, which we are waiting to hear back from the Attorney General on. And this hearing is required to take public input on these fees. As they're suggested here, the Board of Selectmen has gone over this a few times. We want to hear from the public and see if there's any recommendations, etc. And then if this is changed or adopted unchanged, It will then be posted in the town clerk's office for a couple of weeks, and then will be effective when we hear back from the Mass Attorney General on the general bylaw recodification. So let's first of all open this up to see if either Nadine or Bob have any comments, and then we'll open it up to the public.
I just would like to say that I think the board has, worked on this extensively back and forth to come up with what we think are reasonable fees, so that, there's a set fee or a warning given to people for various violations, and I personally feel that we're not excessive on any of these fees.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, the other thing I should note on this is that it also says who is the person who enforces it, which is really important to know. For instance, on the animal control, it's the animal control officer. Or if it's any law enforcement, or it's a select board license, et cetera, or the police department. So are there any comments from the public on this? Would you please come to the podium and state your name and address?
Harold Dennis Sears, 928 Boardman Street. Basically, I wanted to make a couple comments about Chapter 63 on this list, your big list here. I was contacted by a couple people in town recently who had been having a problem with a bear. And the bear problem was that they had a neighbor who was feeding same bear. And basically, what I was curious about is that whether or not the board, or however it would happen, has ever considered, making that. I know Great Barrington, just to the north of us, passed a ordinance in effect that basically said to do so, was an illegal process. And others in the state of Massachusetts have also done that. And as well as I hearken back to, I know that can be problematic from when we first came up here to Sheffield. Basically, in my wisdom, I inadvertently, we had a wrought iron hook that had a bird feeder on it. And basically what had happened was that a huge black sow bear had developed a habit of getting that bird feed in that bird feeder to the point where it would just take that wrought iron hook and just bend it right in half. And so I went out one night when she had done that and basically went up and kicked her in the behind. And basically, all she did was kind of like turn and look at me like, when this is all done, I'm going to eat you, to be quite frank. But, what I learned was that we really needed to not only make sure that we do something to protect ourselves from bears, but also to make sure that we don't have a bird feeder problem that tends to draw the bears. So what I'd like to put before the board, however it would need to be done, is that these people that had called and said that they had a neighbor that was feeding a bear, that's one thing that can be done. Is to pass some form of local legislation that basically says, no, wild black bears and bobcats and other animals that can harm people, no feeding them, okay? But you also need to take into consideration that, that you also have the problem of like the bird feeders that attract bears and so forth. So I'm not sure whether we have any local ordinances or whether it's a state ordinance or anything about I know some places have these ordinances that basically say that bird feeders all have to be gone by a certain time of the year and so forth. So all I wanted to put before the board was that, at least a couple people in town have gone through that experience in a lot less potentially harmful way than I did in my ignorance many years ago. But that, whether or not the board either has any plans or would consider plans to add that to some of these things that are in these articles.
So Dennis, if you stay around for number 10, okay, we will be talking about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I just want to point out that this hearing is about bylaws that have been adopted in Chapter 63. The only thing that we have in there are dogs. So we'll be discussing later on possibly adding something. So these fees and fines in Chapter 63 only deal with dogs because that is the only thing that is in Chapter 63. So stick around for number 10, okay?
Okay.
And see if what the board discusses bears further comment. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, then I think I would like to request a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And would the board like to take some action on what's in front of us?
I'll make a motion that we accept the fee schedule as presented this evening.
Second?
And we'll pass it on to the town clerk. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is approval of minutes, and we have quite a few sets. Is there a motion on this?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes from September 29th, October 3rd, October 6th, 2 sets, October 7th, and October 13th.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And thank you, Jill, for being so up to date on what seems to be an awful lot of meeting minutes. Next item is a discussion, possible action regarding agreement with the Police Officers Association. This is the union for our officers, police officers. Rhonda?
So we had a request from the Officers Association to open up the contract. So it's midterm bargaining is what we called this. And so we met with them maybe 3 or 4 times. The chief was involved, and I was there, and 2 officers. And we brought back everything that was discussed to the Board of Selectmen, and we worked out an agreement. So it's an amendment, a memorandum of agreement that would go along with their contract. And what the changes were was it gave the full-time officers an increase, and it also gave the first-year officers a little bit of a bump up. Right now they were at 50, and we agreed to go to 55, which officers have to do for their first probationary year. So this would give our police officers, beginning January 1st, all the salary changes will take place January 1st. A full-time officer will go to $61,500. July 1st, they'll go to $63,000. It's making them more in line with communities in the surrounding area. We were a little bit on the low side. It also increased all part-time officers to $22 an hour. And then what we did was we talked about a shift differential. The association gave up their shift differential probably about 6 years ago, I think it was, for a bump in their base salary. And it was quite a big bump, if I remember, larger than normal. But now they would like the shift differential back. So we agreed to a 4% shift differential for the evening shift, which is 4 p.m. to midnight, 6% for the midnight shift, which is midnight to 8 a.m., and 2% for all weekend shifts. And then we added a holiday of Juneteenth to their list of paid holidays.
And the reason we did this, would any board member care to address that?
Well, I can address it. Basically, our wage differentials and stuff were a little bit low compared to surrounding towns. Many of you may realize that we had lost several officers, and our officer team was dwindled down, and we needed to do some readjustment, which we've had to do like every other town. So this, I think, is a good compromise, and our police officers seems to be okay with it, and our town administrator seems to be okay with it. So I think it's actually a good win-win for both.
I agree.
And I think we want to thank Rhonda for negotiating this on our behalf. I think this is going to go a long ways to keeping people in Sheffield. Sheffield's always been viewed as a training spot, but we'd like to have police officers think of it more as a stay spot. Also, if anybody pays attention to what's going on, Bob is very accurate in what he said, and with the move to full-time police officers, the Police Reform Act, the requirements are becoming a lot stricter for police officers, and surprise, surprise, not as many people are going into the profession. So I know that we had accepted this earlier, but I think we need to have a formal ratification on this.
I make a motion.
What do we need, Rhonda? Because I know we had accepted.
This was just an announcement.
This
to
is
the
an
public
announcement,
that
so we need to
you've
take
done
no further action.
it. No, you've already taken the action.
Okay, great, all right. Our next item is discussion possible action regarding a zoning marijuana amendment on the zoning bylaws. And we have been listening to the residents in Sheffield for some time I guess I would say the bloom is off the marijuana. One, in terms of the situations we've had with applicants, and as they have worked their way through the planning board, to the fact that the state has changed the marijuana state law considerably, and the town has taken action to protect itself. The town has decided to suspend payments of all of the community impact fees. I think we did that effective September 1. We're still collecting the 3% excise on marijuana retailers. But we just sensed that there was the feeling in town that we may be over marijuana. So this bylaw, which has been discussed before, basically would ask the voters to amend the zoning bylaws by negating everything except for marijuana retail. If it were passed by the voters after going through the planning board, which has control over the zoning bylaws, then it would also have to have a town election and receive, I believe, a majority vote at a town election. So this has been through legal. Rhonda, would you bring us up to date on legal regarding this?
So legal made the changes that, in his opinion, it was just the wordsmithing, I believe, is what he has changed. He's given us direction that it has to go to a ballot question. And so at this point, if the board is all set with this from the changes that legal made, it would be sent on to the planning board to continue their process.
They, I think, would either tweak it further or vote to support it or not to support it. I think there's been discussion about a special town meeting before the annual town meeting, so that this might, if it was approved by voters, make it on that ballot in May, but we have to work on the timing. So I guess the matter before this board tonight is to discuss this further, the changes that legal has come back, and either we send this forward to the planning board or we nix it.
I make a motion that we forward it to the planning board.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any right, so we'll send it on to George and the planning board. The next item of business is also related to marijuana, and that deals with discussion possible action regarding hiring a marijuana odor specialist. Rhonda, could you bring us up to date on the
Sure.
meeting we had with the growers?
So we had a meeting with the marijuana cultivators, trying to discuss ways that they could maybe lessen or remove, I don't think they'll ever be able to remove, but at least lessen the odors that are coming from their operations. So it was a good meeting, and Nova Farms mentioned that they were going to hire an odor specialist to maybe take a look on ways that that could be lessened. And then Bob thought that maybe the town should hire their own odor specialist to do the same thing, to see if there were ways that we could bring to them, the growers, to help the residents who live near and can smell the odors from their operation.
So Bob, do you have an approach for us on this?
Basically, the approach would be just to research and find anyone I'm not sure we'll find anyone that's near our area, but we'll need to research a qualified consultant, and hopefully what we can come up with is a reasonable cost and a ability to not totally get rid of the smell, because we know that's not possible, but at least limit it and tamp it down. We're not looking to hurt the growers. We just want to make sure the residents are not suffering with excessive odor and smell. And to do that, we need more information.
And where are you thinking the money can come from?
I would assume it would come from free cash. That's where the money goes to, so that's where we would probably.
So we're looking to put an article on either the special town meeting or the annual town meeting requesting an appropriation for what this would cost.
Yes.
First, we have to find somebody.
Okay, well, I can contact the Cannabis Control Commission. They, I'm sure, aren't going to recommend anyone, but they may have had experience with this, and I'd be delighted to do that. And does the board wish to take any further action on this at this time? In other words, kind of think about making the commitment to have an article, and then we have to fill in the amount of money depending on a proposal, or do you want to let this float for a couple more
I think we need more
meetings?
information.
More information
We
would
need
be
to find out if we've got even a person that's willing to take this on for us.
Okay, but it sounds like we're putting a little bit of a stake in the ground that this is our intention. Okay, all right. Catherine, you look like you have a comment.
Catherine Miller, 801 Clayton Road. I think it's an interesting idea, but do we have any idea whether or not throughout this country there is such a creature? I mean, for example, Colorado has been wrestling with this for eons, and I'd be curious to know, I'm just purely, I know you're going to do research, but I think to try to find somebody who truly can get their arms around this may take a while. I think it's a rather complex issue, although I have to tell you, as one who is a little bit not happy about it when I hit it head on, I think it would be nice to find a way to mitigate. We can't eliminate it, but we might be able to mitigate it. But I think it's going to be a challenge to find somebody.
Worth researching.
I've only done a slight Google search, and there are companies out there that specify and particularly just focus in on odor control in cannabis and other odor controls also, so in different industry.
Okay, any other comments? Otherwise, we're going to go on. All right, so, and Bob, you do research, I'll contact the Cannabis Control Commission, let's see what we can find out. All right, our next item is discussion action regarding a resignation from the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority. Rhonda, please.
So Renee has submitted her resignation from the Berkshire Regional Transit Authority's, is it called Advisory Board, I believe? So we need to decide whether you're going to accept that resignation.
I think we already decided that we weren't taking this on. It was a joke, of course. I make a motion that we accept Renee's resignation to the Berkshire Regional Transportation Agency's Advisory Board.
And I'll give a reluctant second.
That's enough. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll recuse myself. Okay, so that brings us to the next point, which is we need discussion, possible action regarding appointment to the Regional Transit Authority Advisory Board. So,
I have served in this role before, found it to be kind of a waste of
Thankless.
time.
yeah,
And so I guess my question is, are we obligated to provide them with a board member?
we actually joined BRTA so many years ago because we have tried to get bus service. So we do have, it's a non-fee membership, but we do have, we are in that advisory board. I think our voting percentage is like 0.18% because it's graduated on population. It would be great if somebody wants to do it, but I have found, the reason I resigned is that I found that I can make no effective action.
I just want to make sure it doesn't hurt us to not appoint someone. I'm willing to accept the role. It's relatively painless to,
Good.
to not show up if I don't feel like it.
I mean, it's
Which is kind of how I handled it the last go
Once every
around.
2 months.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday. It's in person.
Catherine's asking, what do we get? And my question is, the senior van comes through Berkshire Regional Transit
Yes.
Authority, and I want to make sure that I'm not cutting off my nose to spite our face.
And
So,
do I remember correctly, there was also a van going to be providing transportation in Egremont and another town combined?
I think Alford and Egremont are
Was it
working
Alfred
together.
and Egremont?
And then also there's the great, which I find to be of more interest, and they also have a committee, which is Great Barrington has put together a grant, gotten funding, and they are looking at a very micro pilot regional South County transportation system. We have no bus service. We're going to get no bus service. All right, I think I can probably...
You've worked that really hard.
I have, and we did have bus service, but it was at the wrong time of day, but at least we got Route 22 out of Great Barrington. So the folks in Great Barrington have put together this coalition, and I think that's the more interesting in my mind. But if someone would like to make an application to have this position, it is interesting, and there's good people on that board. I just was very frustrated by not being able to do anything that was of value to Sheffield. So maybe we leave it that if anyone's interested, it's not an onerous commitment of time. You do get to go to Pittsfield, and it is twice every 2 months, and the meetings are usually about 2 hours. But if you're interested, please send an email or anything to Jill or Rhonda, and we'll move on.
Let's leave that out there in case
Okay.
someone's interested.
All right,
Perfect.
and if you want to apply, please do.
I just want to make sure we're not,
Yeah,
by
maybe
not
that's a question.
having a
Yeah.
representative, does that affect our
I know
ability?
there's representatives from a lot of communities, and they don't show up.
Yep.
Whether that's better or worse, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. All right, so our next item is discussion possible action regarding the Board of Health license fees. Now, I think, Rhonda, would you bring us up to date on the meeting that was had with Nadine and Jane and, I don't know, Pat, okay, great.
So we had a meeting with Pat and Jane, Nadine and I, and we talked about the proposed fees, license fees and inspection fees that the Board of Health brought forward for the board's Select Board to approve. It was a very productive meeting, and I think we were able to get some of our questions answered at that meeting. And Jane took this back, I think with Pat's help, and made some suggestions, which you'll see in the smaller version of this chart that I made for you. It's the lighter colored, the suggested fees, and I also left the existing fees so that you had that for comparison. So we've all had a chance to look at those, and Renee had some questions that she and I discussed. I forwarded them also to the board to take a look at some of those questions. I knew Pat was going to be here tonight with maybe some of the questions that we didn't have an answer to. She might be able to help us understand a little better.
Okay. So, Pat, you have a copy of this?
I'm not sure about what you have.
It's the
Let's
same
all make
chart.
sure we're working off the same sheet. Okay. So, I just, okay. All right, one of my questions, I think the septic system permit fees are in, so we're good with that. That's good. I couldn't understand some of the differences with the permit fees under the food permits. I found that particularly the yellow highlighted area, the frozen dessert production standalone with other license, milk and cream, I just had a little trouble understanding where there was, a $50 suggested permit fee or a $25 and then a suggested inspection.
Right.
Maybe you can explain those.
Yeah, the general, two things are operating here. We're ranking the food establishments by a risk level, which then also suggests a higher inspection number going with that. We're also trying to combine those, milk and cream being one of them. If they've got a regular restaurant license and they then need this as well, there's not going to be a separate inspection for that, but there is a separate fee that is required for that. So it's a little bit of a mix and match in that section. I understand why it may be confusing.
Okay, my question still comes down to, I can understand some of the inspection differences. Again, I think the ranking is an extremely good idea. Put the risk where the risk is. But I don't understand why the permit fees are not $25 across the board, why some of them are $50 versus $25.
In most cases, that's because it also allows them to sell at the farmer's market. And so we're not doubling up on some of these.
Okay, then that's got to be noted in the notes column.
Yes, and I thought that it had
Because
been.
it's not.
All right, we can clarify that.
Yeah, so anyone who's 50 can sell at the farmer's market without additional license?
Without an additional permit, yes.
Permit, okay, so, let me just make sure I've got the right ones here. Okay, now,
And that one.
the next,
But anybody who's licensed, a Sheffield business who's licensed by Sheffield, their farmer's market permit is included
It's
in that
folded.
anyway, right?
Right, is folded into that.
So,
okay, so we should, that's a very nice thing to have. I think it'll make it much easier for everybody. So could we update the notes?
right, but that doesn't explain the difference between your 25 and 50.
Well, I know, thank you,
Okay.
Rhonda. So I'm still back to the suggested permit fee. I would just be happier if everyone was 25. Again, I can understand the difference in the inspection fee because that's actual labor. A permit fee is paperwork and making sure that the company has a permit. If anybody wants to correct me, please do, but that's how I've always that they're permitted to do business, but I don't understand a difference in fees on that.
Right, and I'm looking at Jane's notes and realized that part of the difference also is whether or not they're an outside vendor that is not a town, a Sheffield vendor. But you're right, I have to clarify that and be sure that that should be a distinction, and if not, to modify that.
So maybe for tonight, because I think the board is anxious to see if we can't approve something.
I agree.
So why don't we, for tonight, make this list of fees applicable to in-town businesses? And then if there's any question as to whether it's a difference for out-of-town, Pat, you can come back with that? How's that sound?
Sure.
Okay, so I would like to suggest that we take, for the frozen dessert production, standalone or with other license, we make the suggested permit fee $25, unless there's objection to that, because I just don't see the difference.
I don't have an issue with that, but I have a hard time approving this without Pat taking it back to the board and making sure that that is the direction that Jane was thinking.
Right.
Because this isn't straightforward. There's some pieces coming into this that, so I would just like to say, maybe if that's the area of concern,
Oh, there's more. I mean, I agree with you.
then what I'm
don't-
suggesting is that we just hold those.
Okay.
Let's hold what you have questions on, approve the rest of it, and let Pat take the rest
I'm
of it.
good with that.
Is that a
Okay,
good suggestion?
Let's get
Right,
all,
let me explain that we had sent this out hoping to get this kind of feedback prior to this meeting, and that we have a meeting tomorrow evening where we can then deal with this, but we had hoped to get the feedback and be able to make
but the
changes.
board didn't have a chance to meet on it.
But in clarification, after speaking with Pat today, I think what she was looking for is feedback from Nadine and I about whether this captured
right.
what our concerns
Oh,
were.
okay.
So,
And I was sick all last week, Pat. I'm sorry, I did not have a chance to really get to
So this
it.
isn't going to happen.
Okay, so let's see if we can work out a game plan for tonight, and that is those things that we can approve that go with this. I
And
think
then-
this is following what Nadine said.
Let's see what Rhonda's suggestion here is.
so why don't we give Pat the feedback and talk about the licenses where you
Okay.
have some, and approve it as a whole,
Okay,
once the Board of Health is also in agreement with
Okay.
us.
okay. So my next question, so we've got those changed. My next question was the new food establishment plan review. This, I believe, is something that goes to the planning board for them to deal with, and then also the Board of Health. So I don't know, this is a plan. There's nothing finalized at this point, from what I understand. So I'm just wondering if an inspection fee should not be a permit or
No,
a
we
review
actually go
fee.
out and review the site with the plans and the layout and tell the individual, no, you can't put that slop sink next to the stove or whatever.
So it is an
It
inspection
is an
fee.
inspection.
Okay.
It is.
All right, I'm fine with that. Okay. Just on the construction and decommissioning, there's nothing inspection. If it comes in from the driller or the closer, that's good. All right. Now, it seems like to me tobacco has gone up quite a bit. It used to be $60, and I'm just, I don't support smoking, but I'm just curious as to why tobacco is so high for a permit fee versus everything else.
I can't answer that, actually. I think we were there looking at what other towns were doing, and frankly, in this case, as you with the salaries and the fire department, the police department, looking at the kind of fees that were being charged in other places. Not that we have to follow that in all points. I take Nadine's comment from the meeting. But we have not done a good job, frankly, in the inspection and permitting of tobacco. And this will be a whole new ballgame starting in 2023, when I'm hoping we'll be able to join the collaborative in the statewide, they have a statewide contract. They have a regional contract for state services, and we will join.
I would rather that you put the inspection fees higher, because I do seem to remember you have to inspect for signage, you have to inspect
Right.
for this.
It's quite
I'd
a lot.
rather you put the money where the money is going to be spent, rather than potentially single them out as a very high permit fee. I don't know how the board feels about that, but if you have to put time, you have to go in and look at it, then you should be charging for it, because that's an incurred cost.
So let me take that back.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I was trying to express, Pat, that we don't have to increase permit fees just because some other town is charging a higher
Right, no,
permit fee.
I cited your.
I know you did, and I'm just supporting what Renee is saying. We don't need a $100 permit fee for tobacco if 60 is more than sufficient to cover, and we don't have a problem.
Or 50, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And if you have to inspect them once a month by law, then charge for it, because the town should not be subsidizing any of this, in my opinion. The other thing, I guess on the ice rink, you have to check for carbon monoxide, but you do it once, and the other period of time, they're on their own.
Well, you check that the equipment is functioning properly, and then, yes, it should continue. I mean, you get your car inspected once a year, so it's sort of.
Okay, so this one might be another one that says per inspection? Or if you only do it once, fine, if it's working well, I don't know.
That's my understanding.
So
And the
probably not
season
a
is,
permit, just the inspection.
So I don't know that you need a permit fee, just an inspection fee. I mean, what are you giving a permit for? To have an indoor ice rink?
yes.
Yeah, I don't know why the Board of Health would have the responsibility for issuing a permit. Again, I'm fine with an inspection fee, but I don't think we need a permit fee.
If you legally have to do it, it's one thing.
Right.
But,
We'll find out.
okay, all right, and we appreciate your openness in hearing our comments. Now, on the lodging inspections, we talked about this before, the last time we talked about this. So the Board of Health is required by law to inspect lodgings, Pat?
Which we do not do.
Okay, which is fine. I mean, if that's what the law says, that's what the law says. Then what is the town licensing lodging for?
Right.
So why are we kind of double
Dipping,
dipping?
exactly.
There's,
So you have to do the food inspections, you have to do the, all the stuff for the lodging.
we would love to do all the stuff for the lodging. We don't have the staff to do that, and there's no one at this point to contract with to do that. So we're up in a difficult tree here for this situation. I think it's a serious problem that we don't do that inspection. And I would like to see that changed and hope that with the Southern Berkshire Public Health Collaborative in the next year, we will be able to hire a joint building inspector who would then be qualified to do that kind of work. So I'd like to have this on the books as an inspection.
So what do we do in the meantime? Again, if you don't have the capacity to inspect, should you be charging a permit?
There is no.
There is no fee on that
Okay,
line.
so should we just kind
It's
of
just a placeholder,
It's a
apparently.
placeholder?
Right.
Okay, all right. So the select board will go ahead and continue to issue its, okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Where was that? You had a thing that said with inspections and other permits.
Very bad.
I'm sorry, I don't have all my paperwork here. I've gone through.
It's right on the very bottom.
Very bottom of the chart, the last
Okay,
thing.
great, I know, but I had a thing. So you have a permit of 100, and then that's higher than I think that's higher than any permit you have except for well construction and a full-service restaurant. So I'm just wondering if that permit fee should be more reasonable?
Well, unfortunately, we don't know what those other things may be, but I can understand the permit fee lowering. I have trouble conceding on the inspection, since we don't know what we might be getting in for.
Well, I have the feeling that your experience probably informs this complete list. So if you haven't had it before, you may not come up with it again.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you've got a very complete list of what I think the Board of Health has seen over the years.
Right.
So I would just ask you to consider that, because I think it's, I don't know what
Consider
Bob and
taking it off or
Nadine think.
lowering it?
Lowering.
Okay.
I just think it's excessive, given that we don't know what it is. And again, it's a permit. I don't have problems with the inspection fee, because that's money that has to be paid to someone. And then I think my final issue was, I think if we go up to the nonprofit, where is that?
Not-for-profit-based kitchen,
Oh, yeah, I think that was it.
so it's the fifth one from the
Yeah,
top.
thank you.
It looks like they've removed all of that.
Yeah, I have problems with the town paying for the fees associated with inspections, in the sense that, you're very good, and I commend you for that. If you don't pass the first time, you get another inspection, and that goes up. You don't pass the second time, there's a learning curve here that just says, we're just going to keep coming back. I don't have a problem with not having a fee, but I don't know that the town should pay for the inspection fees, because every nonprofit kitchen needs to be inspected.
I think you're not understanding what that line is.
Oh, good, explain it to me.
That
Okay.
line would be for an example, the Friends of the Senior Center want to use the American Legion's kitchen.
Uh-huh.
The Legion has already been inspected, and then they wanted to charge the Friends group for using it. It wouldn't just be the Friends,
Oh,
it would
okay.
be the People's Pantry. So we had asked that not be a fee that's.
Okay, so show me where the line is that shows the not-for-profit, using the American Legion as an example, that they have been inspected. Just show me the line, I can't find it.
I think you're both talking two different things.
Okay, thank you.
I think we are, that's why I brought it up.
So let's just use the American Legion if you're already using it. That has to be inspected, just annually inspection. I think it's okay not to charge the other groups who use that for a permit or an inspection. But you have to have that initial inspection.
And I don't
So
see
just
it.
say that whoever we inspected continued to fail. This could end up costing the town quite a bit of money. So you have to decide whether you want the town to absorb the costs of inspections, the initial annual inspection for nonprofit.
Well, I would say no. I mean, the nonprofits they're charging people to use the facility. So there should be enough income coming in to offset that once-a-year inspection fee.
So is where we put this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'll get to you in a minute, George, is it line 5? Because again, I don't see nonprofit, whether it's the church or Christ Trinity.
Yeah, I'm a little
or Dewey
confused
Hall.
about the notes.
Down farther, if you go just above lodging, you'll see nonprofit temporary.
Temporary.
Okay, all right, so that's the one I was talking about.
Right.
All right, so you do need a fee for the not-for-profit-based kitchen, line 5.
Right.
If
For the
that's-
inspection.
If that's what the American Legion
Yeah.
is, or Dewey Hall.
Right.
And that would be on the inspection side.
Right.
And again, that should be,
To cover your cost of
that
the
should be to
inspector.
cover
If
the
it's
cost.
$50, then it's $50.
so be it. George, did you have a comment? If you do, please come up to the podium, thank you.
We charge is for the rent of the hall,
Okay,
for the use of the hall, okay? That to help cover the costs of insuring the building. If we can't have insurance on the building, then we can't rent the building.
I don't think we have any disagreement with that at all.
And so, most of the tenants that use the people that rent the hall, okay, either supply their own food or just use their kitchen to heat it up. It's organizations like the Friends who want to use the hall to cook in it there, okay? When we use it, it's strictly, you know, we're all volunteers. Breaking Bread's all volunteers. They don't pay us a dime, okay? So to say we gotta pay for an inspection, I mean, you can only inspect when we're in operation, okay? Because if we're closed, we're closed.
Well, you know, regarding the inspection timing, it's the same issue with Dewey Hall and Christ Trinity and, you know, Old Parish and Our Lady of the Valley. I think we're actually saying the same thing. We're not suggesting that the Board of Health charge you a permit fee to have that kitchen.
Right.
But a kitchen that is being used has to be inspected, and it will be up to the inspector to coordinate with whomever the nonprofit is to be there at a time that's convenient. And we're not suggesting you don't charge. We're not having anything to say about what your fees are that you charge others. That's your business. And we're just saying that if
It's no different than inspecting any other kitchen.
Right.
If you're inspecting a kitchen of a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, or
you know,
even a
the Board of
private
Health
theater.
The Board of Health is coming to inspect a kitchen of a bed and breakfast. We may not be operational at the time, but the kitchen is still inspected.
Yeah.
But a bed and breakfast is for profit.
Well, George, the bottom line is
Okay.
the kitchen needs to be inspected.
Yeah, the kitchen needs to be inspected. Somebody has to pay for it.
There's been some confusion as to what, if the kitchen needs to be re-inspected, if a group like the Friends or a private party wants to come in and pay you for the use of the hall and use the kitchen. We're saying, no, that private party does not have to pay for a re-inspection of the kitchen because the kitchen has already been inspected and passed. That's kind of how I'm hearing this. I hope I got it right.
So Pat, you need to have an inspection fee for nonprofits.
Right.
Okay.
That line is showing nothing at this point. But not a permit fee, just an inspection fee. Okay.
And I think that other line, wherever it was, needs to be taken out.
Yeah, it's under lodging, just above lodging, not-for-profit temporary food service.
Yeah, that
You
one
could
needs
just
to be taken
delete
out.
that line completely.
Okay, so I think that's my questions, and I appreciate you answering them for me. Are there any other questions on this so that when we leave this item, Pat knows exactly what the feelings of the board are?
I'm good.
I'm very good. I think you've gone through it in fine detail, and I think the Board of Health has put a lot of work into this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I think it's been a good
collaboration
collaboration of trying to get to a place that makes sense for the town as well as to make sure that the Board of Health is covering their costs.
Right, but we appreciated the meeting.
No,
We appreciated the meeting that we had with both of you and found that helpful. I'm sorry we weren't able to get the feedback we were given.
I apologize.
So Pat, do you have any other questions on this? Is there anything in your mind that's not been clarified? I know you're going to put a note on the note side as to whether there's the farmer's market included.
Right.
And if you have to distinguish between in-town businesses and out-of-town businesses, then that would be fine.
Yep. I can't think of any. When is your next meeting that you would try to handle this?
Well, we could take this up at a working meeting.
Which would be next Thursday, right?
The other meeting would be 14 days from today, the 21st. So so if you have it ready, we'll take it up at our working meeting.
Do we want to also address?
Yeah, we will, yeah.
So that next Thursday, this week, Thursday?
No,
The day-
Next Thursday.
Next week.
Not this
17th,
Thursday.
I think the date is, yeah.
I'm getting to it, I'll tell you in a minute, it's the 17th.
17th, okay.
So Pat, the other thing that I'm going to bring up is, that kind of ties in with this, and I don't know that there would be no reason why you have had a chance to see this before, but one of the things we were going to take up as a matter with this is that we are concerned, even more concerned, since this won't be taken up until next Thursday, a week from Thursday, excuse me, regarding the permits system that this was going to go into. So rather than just writing you and the board a letter, why don't we just talk about this for a moment? I think we're recommending, and the town administrator's office is in agreement, that for this set of licenses, the town administrator's office would volunteer to put the licenses out for this year. We would look forward to the permit system being up and running. Thank God, I hope we have someone there to enter it for next year, and we would really, if that system is ready to run on December 30th, whatever new licenses and permits come in, let it handle it. But I just see us into an incredible crunch right now.
Right, I think it's virtually impossible, A, to get it in there, and B, for us to learn it sufficiently to be
Right.
able to apply it. And it's so frustrating. It's been going on for so long. And I'm also working with the Alliance, who paid for it, to get them to insist that it be bumped forward, because we've had
Yeah.
nothing out of them for that whole first year.
I think for us, we had that conversation, like, where are we with the software, right? The software's not quite ready. We don't really have someone to operate it. So we think that this is a reasonable solution, that we just go ahead and do the permitting as we have been.
Right.
And, for this year, because we're coming up on the end of the year real fast.
Right, absolutely. I appreciate that, and I'm sorry that it has come to it.
That's okay. We just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Because we did leave that meeting, I think, without that question sort of being answered.
Right.
Rhonda had sort of put it out there, and we never really did address that, so.
Right, and despite having just received a very optimistic email this week from them, it's too late.
Yeah, we still don't have the bodies to do the work. Yeah.
So maybe what we'll do is just take this burden off of, nobody needs to think about it anymore. We'll get this wrapped up a week from Thursday. If there's any questions that come out of the Board of Health meeting, maybe Rhonda and Nadine can get back together, and discuss this with you, but the goal will be to have this finalized and into the town administrator's office for license generation, maybe by the end of next week, since we'll meet on this on Thursday.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Pat.
very much. Okay. So, all right, I think we're to number 10, which is discussion action on proposed bylaw regarding feeding wildlife. Pat?
I will be back.
Okay, so then I would like to just skip to number 11. I'd really like to have Pat be in on this conversation. And we have an incredible announcement for Rhonda to make.
So we applied for a MassWorks grant for Weetog Road, which has been a problem road for us for years and years, trying to maintain the road, but also maintain the trustees' property so that we're not washing away any of their endangered species or any of their other soils down into the water. So with BSC Group's help, we applied for the MassWorks grant and we were awarded $1 million. So we're pretty excited about that. We haven't been given the go-ahead yet to start work, but it'll be to try and engineer the problem of the water coming down off the hill, hitting the road, and then having to travel down again. So we're hopeful that we'll get some drainage solutions for that. That'll work for everybody.
It's very exciting.
I mean, this is really key, $1 million that the
It's a lot of
town
money.
has saved
Yep.
because of Rhonda and BSE groups.
Yes.
Efforts. This is monumental.
Yep. Well done.
Well done,
Very
bravo.
fortunate. This is our fourth, I think, MassWorks grant for $1 million, so
You've done very well.
we've been very good to Sheffield.
Yes, so congratulations. Pat, we were just going to talk about discussion action on proposed bylaw regarding feeding wildlife. And Dennis, this gets to your matter. There's two ways that this can be done, at least. One of them is to change our general bylaw. So when we talked about the dogs, we add the bears. And that would take a voter approval at a special town or annual town meeting. But it may be the simplest. The other way was what Great Barrington and some others have done, and which is to issue a Board of Health regulation, which is, personally, I've heard a lot of comments about, can I take my bird feeder in at night, or now am I going to be accused and subject to fine because I've been feeding bears and wildlife. So what we've kind of come up with, and the board has not really had a chance to discuss this yet, is adding an Article 2 to Chapter 63 of our general bylaws on intentional feeding of wildlife. And there's basically 3 sections to it. One is what the purpose is, which is just basically to try and, avoid situations where people become too friendly with animals, animals become too friendly with people. Particularly bears are very opportunistic, and usually the bear ends up getting killed, which doesn't seem like a fair deal. The second part of it basically states that there will be no intentional feeding of bears. And it's the intentional and willful feeding of bears. So if a bear comes up and eats a bird feeder, the stuff in the bird feeder, because you didn't bring it in, this is intentional and willful, not just the, oh my gosh, I forgot. Whether on one's own property, the property of another, or town property. Intentional feeding of bears means putting out food and making food available in a manner an average person would construe as being attractive to a feeding bear and likely cause the bear to return again looking for food. The third part of that no intentional feeding of bears section reads, well, bird feeders are attractive to bears if left out overnight. This article does not consider bird feeders to be intentional feeding of bears. The enforcement of this goes to the criminal disposition, which has a set fee of, I think it's $100, $200, and $300, and it would be administered by the animal control officer. Let me get the board comments first. I do want to address the situation that was brought up earlier. The chief of police and Mass Wildlife, DEP, I believe, have been seriously involved in that. And Rhonda, do you have anything more you want to say on that?
I don't have an update on that other than it is our police department, the state police, and Division of Fishery and Wildlife are all investigating the incident.
And they have talked with the person who has been, it is concerned is feeding. Okay,
Yes.
so board comments, and then we'll get to public comments.
I think this is a reasonable solution without being overreaching as far as not allowing people to feed the birds. And I'm comfortable with what is written.
This would have to go before voters.
Yep.
If they vote it up, they vote it up. If they vote it down, they vote it down.
It's totally the voter's decision.
My personal opinion is it's a duplication that we already have the wildlife fisheries, our police department, the DEP. This is already being handled correctly with law enforcement that have the expertise in these type of areas. I feel this would be just duplication, and people that don't have the knowledge and the skills and the backing to enforce these. I think it gets into a lot of gray areas. Technically, I feed the bears every year. They love my cornfields. They make a hell of a mess. But it's not rational, I can guarantee you. I just don't want to put something on the books that's going to have a lot of gray areas that we're not experts in, when we already have a legal system that has, everybody should know by now that feeding wildlife is illegal. That doesn't goes for deer, it goes for bear, it goes for coyotes, it goes for
Raccoons.
everything. So it's not like, it's duplication for me, and I'm not.
And I don't disagree with you. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a whole segment of the population that needs to be warned that the cup that's full of hot coffee's got hot coffee in it. So we're now at the point where we have to tell people that the intentional feeding of bears is dangerous to the neighborhood and shouldn't be done. So while I don't disagree with you at all, Bob, I think, the old-fashioned New Englanders know better, but we're not dealing with old-fashioned New Englanders anymore.
Okay, so let's have public comment. Dennis?
Yes, basically, I like this draft with one change. And the one change is based upon, I've had conversation with the animal control officer who is very experienced in this whole situation, okay? And what I would suggest is that if you just take C and kill the first word that says while, basically what you want to avoid that would create problems with a lot of the public is the only way that you can really be 100% sure on getting this control and not getting the bears in your backyard is everybody would have to bring their bird feeders in. And I don't know whether we have anything like that now or not.
No.
If all you do is basically change that first word, kill the while, and basically say this article considers bird feeders to be intentional feeding of bears.
But that's not our intent.
That's not the intent.
That's not our intent.
Well, I think.
So feel free to vote it down, Bob.
Is that I think if you do that, then you've kind of given the people that, okay, if you're going to have bird feeders out, then you're going to, in effect, possibly intentionally feeding the bear.
Okay, so Dennis, thank you for your comment. This may be something, if the board sends this forward, that you could bring up at town meeting, but I think it's the intent of at least two of the people on here not to make it that bird feeders are considered. I mean, we're really trying to go after the person who is putting food out knowing that bears are going to come, and somewhat putting a neighborhood at risk, putting children at risk, putting people at risk and animals. So I think this is a step too far for me. But thank you.
I think Dennis is showing us exactly what Bob is trying to tell us. We may be going a step too far.
So thank you. And I know George I think you had a comment, and then Pat, you.
I think you're
Could you give your name and address, please,
George
George?
Foley Road. I think what you're doing is you're duplicating what the state already has in their hunting, in the regulations, okay? It's already illegal. When you get a complaint about somebody feeding the bears, the first thing you do is you call up the Fish and Game Commission. Somebody's feeding the bears. This is where it's happening. It doesn't need to have a town ordinance to say you don't feed the wild animals. That's what we got a state fish and game for. Why should we burden our officers to go out there and track it down? I mean, we're paying boo-boos of money to the state to do just that. And as far as feeding the bird feeders, I mean, I got bird feeders up there. When I was out scouting without taking the scouts, they said always hang the stuff 8 feet up so that the bears don't get at it. With your food and any smellables. So you put your garbage outside, the bears are going to come there, the raccoons are going to come there. They're not feeding the bear. I'm not intentionally feeding them, but it's there. you know, and bird feeders are gonna attract the birds and bears too. So, I mean, I think let the game warden take care of it.
Thank you, George. I wonder if we should consider making an adjustment to this and basically putting into the article that it is against state law to feed wildlife. And this includes, and basically state what is the legal law and not trying to.
And does it even need to be in the bylaw?
Well, if it's in the bylaw, it does give, if it's in the bylaw, I mean, I hope at some point people read this stuff, or it can be said, you know, it's in the bylaw. I'm just kind of, I'm trying to.
I know what you're trying to do.
Avoid a situation where there is so much overkill that we hear about it every day for 3 months, and it's like, oh, Sheffield, you can't even have a bird feeder, because that's a lot of what's going on up in Great Barrington. So, Pat, let's have your comment, and then maybe we need to think about this further.
Yeah. Time to go home.
Thank you, Pat Levine, 261 East Main Street. This kind of thing was requested by Cassie, the animal control officer. She feels that she is powerless, that if she tries to make a suggestion to an individual, she has no basis for that. And to shove everything off into the state is overkill in another direction, I think, is if I'm understanding her. I would suggest only one change to it, which is in Article C or Section C, whatever that's part, which is, while you want to say it's not considered intentional feeding, to make it stronger that it is ill-advised, or it is dangerous, or something, but make a statement discouraging leaving feeders out overnight. At least making it clear that that is a hazard in bears, that it may not be seen as absolutely directly intentional, but in fact is contributory. Then you might be able to satisfy Dennis.
Thank you, Pat. I don't know that the animal control officer by law has any jurisdiction in this when we've got the state. I don't have a clue. I don't know how this all floats down.
I think we need to think about this a little bit more.
But I think, yeah, I mean, my intention, I think our intention was, and we've debated this, to doing something would give the animal control, if it's in Chapter 63, it would give the animal control officer some jurisdiction. Maybe that's cross-jurisdictional and we don't want to do that.
Might not be.
But we also didn't want to put in something that, you know, has no teeth in it. You know, it's discouraged. Well, we could put that on our news, on the website, and somebody's going to feed a bear is going to feed a bear. So I think maybe we should just think about this and maybe table it for the moment.
That's a good idea.
Because I just don't think we've got it right. I don't think we're threading that needle right. And, you know, if we do have all of this, and I do know that Cassie works for the chief, and I know he's on this, so... All right, let's move on. Table it. Okay, so discussion possible action regarding Veterans Heritage Grant. Do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take it? Okay, so Tammy came to me last Thursday and told me about this Veterans Heritage Grant. And after talking with Jim Miller at the Historical Society, we came up with what was, oh, and by the way, this was due on Friday, or, you know, if it was going to come out of town hall, or it was going to be due on Sunday at midnight. So we came up with a grant, letter of intent. They choose from the letter of intent who they are going to invite to submit an application. But the cemetery and the veteran, it all seemed to connect. And what the letter of intent came down to was for a $15,000 ask with a $7,500 potential match that could be done in kind with volunteer labor at actually $38.50 an hour. I've never seen a grant price out volunteer labor, okay? The cemetery, Tammy and Jim on the Cemetery Commission and the Historical Society have been working on these projects for a while, but basically it consisted of several parts. One, it was going to do an up-to-date inventory of all of the veterans' graves in all public and private cemeteries. And Jim felt that they maybe are not completely up to date. Two, it would create a cross-referenced index of all of the veterans' graves by, I'm not sure what the order is, but the name of the veteran, the cemetery that he or she is in, the service, war service branch, and dates of service. It would also, in identifying and doing this inventory, it would rank the condition of the various headstones for future restoration efforts. And I think that's about where we got to. So we made kind of a unilateral decision, and Rhonda sent it in at the very last minute, plus had some details to straighten out. But we sent the letter of intent in. We thought it could be a potentially wonderful grant. The Historical Society is ready to be involved and provide volunteer hours. Cemetery Commission, at least two of the members are key. And I just kind of wanted to bring it to you that if we were to get a request for an application, would the board support that?
Of course.
No doubt.
That's a motion and that's a second? Okay. Any further discussion?
No, I think it's a great
All
idea.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Update on highway garage. So, Bob, do you want to talk about the physical layout, and we'll have Rhonda talk about where we are, or do you want to talk about it all?
Would you like it?
Go ahead.
Okay. The designer selection committee met. We had 2 applicants. We ranked them, and we have sent them on to this select board. And we have decided to interview both candidates or companies. And I think that's pretty much where we're at. If there's something more you can...
We're getting ready to set up the interviews. I'm sending emails out. I sent one this afternoon. I'll send one in the morning to do the interviews and have the designer selection committee be present. I'm going to ask them in advance for any questions they might have.
And that will be a public open meeting, so it will be posted. And then the select board will make its decision shortly thereafter, or I think it's the
Maybe
next
put it
day
on
or
the
so.
21st or
Yeah.
something, the
Okay.
agenda for the 21st.
Great, but we will have a designer to design this highway garage by the end of this month.
Correct.
Is what it sounds like and what the plan is. Is there anything new to bring us up to date on regarding the physical side and the potential clearing, cutting trees?
No, we haven't got the proposal from Jim Kelly yet, but I'm sure it will be forthcoming soon.
Okay. All right, anything else on the highway garage? It is happening. All right. So, board member items. Bob?
I'd just like to thank our fire, highway, and police departments for the great work they've done under some trying conditions. I'm sure everyone's aware of the accident that happened and the other issues that have gone on in the last few weeks that have been a little stressful. It was also passed on to me by Chief that they were very grateful for the new squad, the new e-tools, these stabilization jacks. Unfortunately, this accident was severe enough where all had to be used, and it worked extremely well. Our departments worked extremely well together, fire, police, and highway, to make it as easy and as efficient as it could be considering the circumstance. So I just want to send a thank you out to all 3 departments. They did great work.
I think all of us share that sentiment.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Nadine?
I'd like to congratulate Mount Everett's Lady Eagles for their soccer team winning the Western Mass Championship. First time ever in the history of the school that the girls' team has won the Western Mass Champion. We've been there many times as semifinalists and not ever come home with the trophy, but those young ladies did an amazing job, and I just think they should be commended for their hard work.
Here, here. I have two items. I just want to remind everyone who hasn't voted yet that the town and state elections will take place tomorrow at the Senior Center from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. My next item is to ask everyone to remember Veterans Day, which is this Friday, November 11th, and I think the two of those tie in together because so many people of our veterans have fought for our right to be able to vote. It'd be a shame if everyone who's registered to vote doesn't exercise that right. And I also just wanted to congratulate the town and everyone who was involved in Trunk or Treat. It seems like it was so far away, but it looked like a good time was had by all. So, Rhonda, town administrator items?
I do. I just wanted to let everyone know that the police department roof bid is in the works and it is released on Wednesday. So we'll be accepting proposals. There'll be a mandatory pre-bid meeting for anyone who is interested in putting in a proposal. So that project is moving forward. Also today, 2 of our highway department employees took the test for the hydraulics. One was our road superintendent who's licensed in Connecticut but had to get licensed in Massachusetts. And the other is one of our light truck drivers who's never held the license before, and both of them passed all 3. So we now have highway employees, more than one, who can operate over the rail mower, which we've never had before. Yeah. So congratulations to Dave Ruat and Sage Angel for taking their tests and passing them.
Great job.
And the last thing I just wanted to give, a town hall schedule will be closed this Friday in observance of Veterans Day, and then we'll be closed on the 24th and the 25th, which is Thursday and Friday for Thanksgiving.
Could we spend just a moment on potholes?
Sure.
Okay. What is the official procedure for notifying the town of potholes?
So if someone finds a pothole, they should notify either me or the highway superintendent, Dave, and then he will put that on his list and get out there within a reasonable amount of time. I'm not going to say that if you call in the morning, it's going to get filled in the afternoon, although that has been happening, but we just have to make sure that they have reasonable time to get them filled.
I saw them out patching again today.
They were.
Filling potholes.
They were.
And, yeah, okay, great. So contact Rhonda or Dave, leave a message, and be specific where the pothole is. And I know they're anxious to get them all filled. I mean, I think our highway department's doing an excellent job. Public comment? George?
Yeah, George O'Lane again. I was just wondering what the status is of the 5G ordinance.
It has gone nowhere.
And what's been done with the COVID relief money? Where's that going?
So the ARPA funds, Rhonda, can you give an update on
Is that what you mean, the ARPA funds or the COVID?
The COVID relief funds, that the 900 and some.
So that's ARPA.
That's ARPA.
That's ARPA, yeah.
The board has set aside some of that money for the Southern Berkshire Ambulance Squad to purchase a new ambulance. That's been decided. They've also committed some to training of employees, some of the employees that are police, highway. I think those were the only 2. And that's as far as they've gotten at this point.
I think, did we spend any money on the broadband study, or did that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I did forget that. We did a study on broadband, and those funds were used to do
On
that.
what?
Broadband.
What was the results of the study?
The town really wasn't interested in having its own build our own broadband system. Martin worked on that before he left the board for months, and there was online surveys at various buildings, and the response rate was, I would say, pathetic. And it was very clear nobody was interested in spending money to research that. We have quite a bit of money left. We have to commit it by '24, the end of '24, and we have to spend it, I believe it's by the end of '26. So we have a little bit more time on it.
So if the Legion put in a request for some funds, we could be considered?
We looked at putting out requests for grants applications. We looked at the Great Barrington, where they have done this, and we found that the funding that was being done was extremely low and the application was extremely onerous. So the board has, other than when we first got the money, we asked for suggestions, that we had two or three hearings or 2 or 3 times when we
Yes.
asked for suggestions. I mean, I don't want to discourage you from writing a letter. I don't want to encourage you. I think the board is neutral. We
Yeah,
just have
and
not taken this matter up from outside organizations. I know we can't use the money for any, there's very specific things that the money can be used for. I believe that no operational expenses are, but I'd have to go back and read it. So, help me here.
Submit a request, and we'll see if we can do something for you.
Basically.
Yeah, because, as you know, partying is way down, and, you know, so the revenue at the hall is, and it needs new windows to keep the heat in. We need better lighting to reduce electrical bill, and
Yeah, I will advise you that the Cultural Council was here, maybe 2 or 3 months ago?
Yep.
And they were asking for some money from the ARPA funds, and we suggested strongly that the town select board would be much more open to considering a request after an appeal had been made to the public for donations. So I'm just going to give you the same advice that this board gave to the Cultural Council. I know our public is unbelievably generous,
They are.
so I'm just giving you the same advice that the board gave the Cultural Council.
And I had one other thing. Last week, the town came through with their big loader and a leaf blower on it, and did a beautiful job of blowing the leaves off the road. Unfortunately, they all wound up in the ditch, and the next good rain is going to put them down the culverts and storm drains and plug them up royally. I say maybe if they had some way to vacuum them out of the ditch so that they keep them away from the culverts and the catch basins and what have you, we wouldn't have as much problems in the spring.
So duly noted. That will be discussed with the Highway Department. Thank you, George. Hi, Janie Smith.
Hi, I'm Janie Smith, 465 Silver Street. Sorry, I was in Sandusfield, so I was unable to make it earlier. The reason why I'm up here right now is I was curious what the proper process would be to talk about the opioid settlement funds that got dispersed to the town. My understanding is at least Great Barrington has gotten the first 2 disbursements, and that funding needs to be used by, or dispersed by June 30th. Certainly, there's been a lot of conversation at different tables that I've been at some potential recipients that would make a meaningful impact on those that have been impacted by opioid overdose. And so I just wanted to find out what the process, if there's been discussion on what the process is, and how the Board of Health or the South County Opioid Working Group or the Southern Berkshire Public Health Collaborative could be part of those conversations.
So the board has discussed that a little bit, Jane, but they've made no commitment yet as to what they want to do with the funds.
Okay.
I think we're getting a total of,
I think it's around 14.
14,000.
Total over 15 years, or is that, yeah. And so the 2 kind of things that at the South County Opioid Working Group meeting today that we were talking about is, I know that Representative Pignatelli had been encouraging towns to consolidate their funds. So that's one way, right? And I suspect that some towns will do that. And there is quite an interest in those of us in the community to have most, if not all of that, go to the recovery center, because they're doing direct work with people with substance use disorder. Some towns probably are going to want to disperse the money themselves, which is fine too. The reporting requirements, as we kind of found out, because we're under the $35,000 per year, we're well underneath that. It's more of a decision on whether you want to have like very micro local control, which some towns find that attractive, or to be part of a regional effort so that those funds really go towards having an impact on a local resource. So I don't know if we could be part of that conversation. We'd love to be. So
Well, I think what we were going to do was reach out to our fire, police, EMS, and kind of see what their needs were.
Correct.
And I'm not sure that we've had a chance to corner everybody and get that done, but we'll make a commitment to get that process started. Because I know Smitty has spoken very passionately about this. And I don't know, we also just need, I think, to see what we've got coming in and.
Sure.
But
Okay.
we'll make a commitment. Thank you for reminding us, Jane.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. Any other comments? Then I will take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.